but I'm going to go ahead and get us started because we wanted to show again what we talked about in 101. So we have all of the 101 topics there. And I believe we were able to touch on the extra pieces or the more in-depth pieces that y'all brought up in the beginning. And now on 201, we plan to go over board composition, board development, and succession planning. When you're looking at this, can you share in the chat or unmute, whichever is easier for you, if there's something that you feel like you still don't understand fully from this list of 101, or something that you want to make sure we hit on 201, or something not on 201 and 101 that you want to make sure that we get to if we can. Awesome.
Oh,
and Janet, I see your hand went up.
Yes, ma'am. How to let go. Can you hear me?
Some of these things I think are going to be conversation. You know, I certainly on the how to let go have shared and will share with you some of the ways that I've done it. But I think a lot of the conversation today, we have lots of slides and things like that, but we really want to make sure that this is making sense operationally, not just from a academic vantage point. And so I am prepared to talk through with you all of what does this actually look like? How does this look in real time? What are some of the things that I've learned not to do that I've messed up? Because succession planning is something I've messed up pretty significantly. And I am happy to share any of that with you. And letting go is one of those things that can be really difficult if you are a founder, CEO in particular. I find that it has its own layer of challenges around the heart connection that we have to the work that we've done and the organization that frankly we've birthed. And how do you start to let go of that? So we will be talking about that, Janet, but let's make sure that it feels relevant.
That's fine. And the other one would be board composition, especially I had to first blow this up so I could see it, but the board composition of heart-centered folks versus business-minded folks, and finding how do you find good board members that fit that business-minded folks when that's not usually who we interact with, if that makes sense.
Sure does.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I'm gonna go ahead and get us started on our first activity. We mentioned that this one was going to be hopefully a little bit more interactive last time we talked, and I'm putting everything up here. Yeah. That way you can see what's going to be coming through. Sorry, y'all. We are going to start out by having y'all think about 5 minutes on your own. Where do you want your organization, or if you're running a program, where do you want your organization or your program to be in 5 years? Big picture. Where do you want it to be? So you're going to have about 5 minutes to think about that. And we've got a couple bullet questions under there. So what is the outcome you're looking for? Maybe that'll help you think about this. And what's your reach and your impact in 5 years? What about with your state or your community or the people you work with or nationally? So we're going to have you have about 5 minutes to think about this part, that first section. After that, I'm going to have you go into a breakout room with your partner, with one person. I believe we're going to be trying to get it to be with your organizational partner, but not everybody will have their organizational partner here, so it's not going to be a perfect matchup. But it's going to be a conversation with you and a partner, maybe two, in a breakout room. Just kind of talking about quickly going over what you thought about, but then where are you currently in relation to what you thought about and where you want to be? And what do you need to get there? And when we're thinking about what do we need to get there, I want you to think about 3 to 4 big steps in getting there. Not all of the little, well, first we got to do this and this and this and this and that, but 3 to 4 big steps in between now and that 5-year goal. Does this make sense so far? I know it's a bit of instructions and we're going through the whole thing. I'm going to walk you through each step again as well, though. So after you have that conversation, you're going to come back to the main room and we'll have a quick recap and just check in with you all. And then we'll move into more of the presentation. But again, first off, we are starting with, where do you want your organization or program to be in 5 years? What is the outcome and what is your reach and impact? I'm going to take the slides down. I'm going to copy paste that into the chat box and I will give you 5 minutes. What did y'all talk about? What did anything come to light or fruition, or did you realize anything?
I would like to say, just for us, we're kind of starting kind of over, and maybe not starting over. We're just kind of revamping some things because COVID hit and just things have fallen off and stuff. So we're just kind of restructuring. But I mean, I have goals for 5 years, like our 5 year goals and stuff. Um, I would like for us to be able, the Texas Family Voice Network, to be able to be sustainable and up and, running, having grants, things like that. Our goal is to reach families across the state of Texas and maybe to provide resources and training if needed and be a support for them. Just so that people will know, hey, the families will know, hey, there's other people out here that's going through some of the same things. And I would like for us to be known nationally as one of the family agencies in Texas, or nonprofits in Texas that provide support and stuff to people and families.
Thank you, Stormy. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Arza.
Yes, so I was in breakout room with Elaine, which was interesting because we were the same organization, and it was really awesome to be together because we're having the same vision, right? We want to see the same things in like 5 years, so that was really cool to know that we're kind of working towards same goals. So before COVID, our center was kind of like a hub for recovery, right? But then our building was closed almost for 4 years. And with the COVID, we moved like online and, everything we still reached out, but our center, right, kind of shifted and changed. So after 4 years, when we reopened, we were kind of reinventing ourselves, right? And we're missing that, right? So our vision and what we want to see it is that our center becomes a hub again for recovery. And we talked about like all the programming and stuff that we would like to, implement. And we also know a struggle of funding because it's easy to find funding for peer support, but like it's really hard to find a funding that will fund actually a center, recovery center. So we just talked about these things, but it was just great to know that we are on the same page and that we are on team, right? That we work for the same goal. So, thank you.
Thanks, Arza. I love that as well. And yes, I intentionally put people who had an organizational partner together here. So I'm glad it worked out. Reggie, and then I want to move into the next piece.
Okay, well, as far as what we have going on now is that we currently we in negotiations for a new location, which we really needed. It's going to put us in closer proximity to the kids that we work with, and it's going to give us a lot more room because, quite frankly, we just outgrowing the space that we're in. The things that we're looking for in the next 5 years, The first thing is that we want to have multiple revenue streams. We want to be able to have grant funding, contracts, and training revenue coming in through those multiple streams. We also want to build our team from where it is now, around 4 or 5 to 10 to 12 paid full-time employees. We want to get our RCO certification. And we want to make sure that all our peer support specialists, get their supervisor training and also can train in different forms of peer support. So we want all our people to be supervisors and trainers. So we can become like the hub where people come to get trained in using to do credible messenger mentoring, youth and young adult peer support, and other forms of peer support. So that's our goals.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited about everything that y'all talked about, and I know we couldn't get to everybody. And before we do move into the next slide and the next piece of this, I want to make sure to mention that this is something that we are going to continue to build on, literally from now through the end of POGA. So keep these thoughts in mind. It's okay if they change. It's good if they change, and it's good if they stay the same. But this is the beginning of us going through the rest of POGA. And I'm really excited to see how this plays out. In the meantime, I'm going to share my screen again. And so with that, I want you to think, what can you get out of the list? Because I know I had asked for you to think about 3 to 4 things, 3 to 4 big goals, right? Big steps. What can you get out of that list that you just made from your board of directors? How can they help? And that's not an answer right now, but think about it for a moment. Is there anything on there that a board member can fill? But also, as you're thinking about that, what are the roles that are required to be on your board of directors? Could that impact the people that you have that are able to help with these goals? Could it mean that you're required to have people that would be really influential and helpful, like a lawyer? Or is it somebody that you don't know if they're quite the right person to help with these goals? And so now you have one less slot to try and find someone intentionally to support this. And when you're thinking about this, where are your organizational gaps or needs that a strong board member could help fill? So again, this isn't you need to answer it right away, but it is a question in relation to what we just did. And since I've bridged it now, I want to make sure that I pass it over to Sheree.
Thank you, Jesse. And I think I saw Reggie's hand up. Reggie, were you wanting to respond to any of these questions?
Well, what I was going to say is that our boards can help us establish those different revenue streams. That's one of the most important thing the board can do. And then our board, but because we're an RCO, our board needs to reflect the community that we serve, more than anything else. So.
Yeah, I mean, so when we're talking about board development and board composition, what we want to do is be intentional. I started to share with you last time, and I'm gonna reiterate what I said, because it's a mistake that I have made, and it's a mistake that I see peer-run organizations, whether you're a recovery community organization, a COSP, an agency that works primarily with folks that are re-entering or diversion from prison or jail, or peer-run organizations in the housing and unhoused space, is oftentimes board development means asking friends or people that we know, could be even family members, to be on our board. And that may be fine as we are just starting out. You usually have an initial board, and that composition really is going to be the folks that really want to see this mission and the organization get up and running. But as you become more sophisticated, and some of your goals, every single one of you talked about revenue. Not surprising, that is probably on everybody's list around where you want to be in 5 years. If we can't financially sustain, there is not going to be any of the other stuff that we want to be able to accomplish. We literally won't be able to fulfill our mission because we won't exist. And so funding and revenue diversity of funding, building out revenue streams inevitably becomes part of what we need in terms of board development. That may not be your initial board. That may not be your family member or the person that you are in treatment with, or colleagues. Reggie's saying, nope, definitely not the people I was in treatment with, just people that we know that we then ask to be on a board member. It takes a lot more intentionality and sophistication as your organization evolves. That means that for us, in the 19 years we've been here, we have had multiple compositions of boards. Some of them have been unintentional, and that is where I have some cautionary tales about not really thinking through who we need on the board for this step in our organizational development, as well as where we want to go in 3 years from now, 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. So some of them were just sort of, I know somebody and let's put him on a board. Big mistake. Some of them have been people coming to me and saying, I want to be on your board. And that's great and fine if I am using strategy around the composition of the board. If I had one board that was very corporate in their thinking. So I had a board that was very connected to for-profit work, even nonprofit behavioral health work that worked at for-profits like Bank of America and different banking institutions. And naturally, what they brought into the board was that mindset. The challenge for them was to understand that we are a grassroots, peer-led organization with a very specific niche of the role that we play in our community, in our neighborhoods, in our state, and at the federal level. So while they were thinking like, we want this to grow and we have to become very formal and we have to have all these official processes and procedures in place, we were thinking, how do we make our mark in the peer run space without turning into something else? As you can imagine, that was a lot of conflict that I had within that board. I've also had boards that were just all peer supporters that didn't have necessarily any of the exposure to some of these bigger, complicated conversations like HR issues, fund development, some of the legal things that organizations inevitably face. The best organization is going to have legal issues and are going to have HR issues and are going to have reporting requirements and things that take people that have a skill set and an experience to help guide you as an executive team and as an executive director. And so knowing what is the right balance of having those folks with that type of experiential knowledge balanced with your heart-led people. Too many experiential knowledge folks will bring you out of the mission and the vision and the heart that our type of organizations were designed to be. Too many heart-led people won't necessarily get the business done. And so as you're thinking about your 5-year plan, and keep in mind, this is a precursor to strategic planning, because real strategic planning includes all of your board. It includes people at all different levels of your organization, community partners and stakeholders to develop your strategic plan. It's not going to be you sitting for 5 minutes thinking what your goals are. It really is the co-collective creative, what do we want to become as an organization? But as you start really defining that, it will give you indication of what you need, what you currently have within your board members, and what you're missing. So for example, I wrote down what Stormy, Arza, and Reggie said in the chat, because based on what you're saying, you need different board members, right? So Stormy, if you just look at what you said, sustainable funding, a nationally recognized organization, and growing to have a statewide reach, what are some of the critical roles that you need on your board to make that happen? Who do you need?
I think we would need someone that would be good at writing grants or grant writing, knowing about the funding that's out there.
That's right. So you're talking about big picture stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need somebody who understands the landscape of family-run organizations, what's available in the state, but also the history of the family recovery movements, right? You need somebody that can do a landscape analysis. You need somebody who's involved in grant writing, particularly if you don't have that on your team. You are an all-volunteer organization, as I understand it. So you're not necessarily going to have that skill. You don't have a staff, right? And so having that role on your board member becomes critical if that's part of your 5-year plan.
Right.
What about Arza? Arza and Elaine, you have shared goals. What are some of the roles that you can imagine, or the skill sets, the people with the skill sets that you would need on your board for as you're reinventing yourself, as your center becomes a hub again, and you want to be able to have all this types of programming as well as set aside funding for your recovery center? What are some of the board member composition that you can imagine you would need?
Well, I'll be honest, like our board member do help us. The center, it is run because the funding comes from the board. So I cannot, think that it is a board, but maybe bigger funding, but like, of course that, like our board members, all of them, they helped with volunteering with me, right? Like with programs. So they're active in programming. They do donate money. They do help develop programs. If, if I have a request, right, that I need help with something, they are available to help. So I don't know, Elaine, I don't think, maybe I don't know what's her relationship with board, but I'm just talking about my program, and I manage center and volunteer services, and I do receive a lot of support from them.
Yeah, actually, Arza has a lot more experience with the board than I do. But I have to say, Shireen, when you put that all together, like how we're all talking about funding, and you said, well, maybe you need a better board, that really stuck with me. And yes, we've had those conversations of how much the board does help with that, but I don't think I really got it clearly until it was just said and presented that way. So in thinking of that, honestly, I would want somebody really connected on my board.
Sure. And
kind of
here's,
thing. And so,
yes.
yeah, there's a lot of money in this town.
Here's the clues that you gave me that's telling me that perhaps, and it's not that you don't have the right board, it's maybe that there's additional board members that you want to recruit for in your situation. You're an organization that has existed for quite a while. You're not a brand new organization. And so your board is going to be a bit more sophisticated because you have a history of operating. You have a financial history as an organization. Likely you have data and you have demonstrated impact. You said it well, Arza, when you said maybe bigger funding. We just had this meeting with our board. When we started getting federal grants, we started getting like $250,000 grants. That then turned into $500,000 grants. That turned into $2 million grants at the federal level. Now we're just having this conversation yesterday about, is it time for us to go after multiple $1-million grants, right? We couldn't have done that 5 years ago because in our evolutionary history as an organization, we had to get our feet into federal grants with these smaller grants, demonstrate we can manage it, understand those systems, do it well. We are now positioned, though, as an organization to go after much larger funding. And so we may not have a board member currently that understands that landscape. It may be time for us to specifically seek that skill within our board development, just because of the evolutionary process of our organization. Yeah, Angelina.
Oh, I have more of a question. So I was just curious, is it important to have people on your board that are passionate about the work that you do in the community? Would that be an ideal candidate for your board?
I would say, well, absolutely. You want people that are going to love what you do, why you do it, How you do it, we're going to get into that a little bit later. You need those people that when everybody else may be thinking money or political aspirations or connections, that will continue to bring the board back to the heart and the soul of what you do. If you have all heart-led people and without sort of that challenge around business and connections and political savvy, you may have a very strong connected to your mission board, but they might keep your agency stagnant. They're not going to help you move forward. If you have no heart-led people, or at least no really strong heart-led people on your board, the temptation is to bring your agency into a very different identity. That becomes problematic in and of itself. You really are looking for a balance of all of those within a good board composition. Add to it, what type of board do you need right now? And what type of board do you need in the future? Do you need a board that is just going to help you maintain how you're currently operating? There have been times when we've needed a board that was not going to come in and start messing around with things. We were at a place where we needed to be solid, consistent, and we needed to just maintain at that time, right? That's a very different type of board. We've had needed boards that were going to help propel us forward, that were going to help us sort of think through strategy and design and funding diversity and all of those type of things, because we were ready as an organization to bring it to the next level. And then there might be a board that you need that is really about sustainability. So part of the answer about your composition is dependent upon where you need, right, what you need right now, and then where you're headed. If you don't have heart-led people on your board, you run the risk of no longer looking like a peer-run organization. Did that help?
Yes, thank you so much for explaining that. I agree 100%. And like, I feel just like right now, you know, Divine Women is very, very new. And so like, I'm just thinking about it like, okay, right now we need those people to push us forward. Like we need
Yes.
those people to help structure, you know, more what the program is doing and where it's going. Right. So I think you just saying that as like, oh, okay, I need more of those focused people right now. And then maybe later on, or at least I guess I'm the heart-led person.
Of course.
But you know, but then also like maybe later on filtering out those people. I feel like it's a delicate balance between what you're doing and what your vision is, and then bringing other people in to meet that. And so
Yes.
to help not take away from, you know, the things that you're already doing or the vision that you already have,
Yeah.
you know, because then I think like if you get all these strong-minded people, it might change the whole aspect of what you're doing. That's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And remember, as the executive director, even if you're a founder, your board supervises you. They determine whether you stay in the organization or you leave, right? Those are your bosses. Having a board that doesn't understand the reason, the why behind your organization and aren't connected to that mission may not want to keep you there if they feel like you're getting in the way of either their own gain or their vision of where they want the organization to go. And so being very intentional about your board becomes really important. I've had boards that I needed to just be a board in name only. They needed to do the functions of it. They needed to show up at the meetings, but that was it. I've had other times where I've needed boards to be much more visionary and help bring us to the next level relative to strategic planning and connections. I will say we just got over the holiday, we just got a donation of $25,000 out of the blue from somebody we didn't know. And I reached out to this person and met with her. And one of the reasons she said she donated to us is because we don't have a board of corporate-led people in the nonprofit space. And so she looked at our board composition and said, given your composition, I can tell you're very connected to the work just by the people you have and do not have on your board. Now, there are other people that are big donors that might look at it and say, you don't have all these corporate people, we're not donating to you. Frankly, those are not the funders that we're seeking anyways as an organization. And so for us, that's not That's not the direction we are in or are headed in anyway, so that's okay. But know that donors are going to look at your board composition and they're going to make some decisions based on that.
And Shireen, you're
Oh, sorry.
there you are. I was gonna say your composition has changed multiple times.
Sure has. Yeah, our initial board was just sort of like what you were talking about, Angelina. We needed very passionate people who believed in the work in their every cellular being. Remember, we were the first standalone peer-run organization in our entire state. So we had a lot to prove and a lot of work to overcome biases. That was a very different type of board. They couldn't come at this from a business mindset. They had to come at this from a very strong mission-centered. We need to be gritty and get this type of organization in our state. Now we have a combination of both, and it's decently balanced.
Thanks. Javier.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I was lower my hand real quick. When I was working at Communities for Recovery and we were doing our audit, I always say audit, our accreditation for Faces and Voices of Recovery about 5 or 6 years ago. At that point, I was in a supervisory position, going into a managerial position. But when we were going through the whole process, I remember like just telling executive director, and Darren wasn't the executive director then, he was many different roles, but I said, can I just stick around? Like, I want to be in all these different meetings. And I remember when we were doing the debriefing on the last day, and they said, love what y'all are doing. Culture is a huge thing. It's apparent. But one of the findings, I guess, was why y'all have had the same board members for years, and they were attached to the founder. And that was like the aha moment for me, just being like in the room, in the conversation, and just, like hearing that for the first time. And then I remember part of the process for the next steps were, okay, how do we let go, right? Not because they were doing a bad job, but because the growth was kind of at a standstill. And it was at a pinnacle moment of like, what are we going to do next? How are we going to continue to grow? And so I remember getting people who went through the services, right? Eventually went into a board member position. Having a family member that has business savvy, and then trying to find that legal person, right? But it was imperative that the board members, there needed to be a change in that compensation. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of share that because all this memories kind of flooded back in my head as we were having this conversation, and it kind of holds a lot of what has been said and is on the information. And definitely the organization kind of grew after that a little bit more. And so
Absolutely.
I know it's even coming up to the 5 years, and that was another thing that stuck with me. It's like, you want to change board members every 3 to 5 years. And at this point, a lot of those board members were 7, 8, 9 years. So it was like, it was a time, but no one had really presented it. No one had pointed it out. And it was just one of those things. I was like, oh, okay, I'm growing, something that I'm going to keep in my bank for future reference. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone because it has to do with the topic.
It's a great example. This is also where board terms come in. There's a reason why you want board members to maybe be 3 to 5 years. You don't want lifelong board members, partly because it does lead to stagnancy. But this is also particularly true of peer-run organizations where we are so relationship and mission-centered that it can be easy to forget that we also are running a business. And I know that can be a hard thing to hear. It took me years, I'm not kidding you all, to expand my awareness, knowledge, and skills around the fact that if we don't do the business well, we can't do the mission well. If we don't do the mission well, the business becomes irrelevant, right? So like I can right now get a whole bunch of different type of funding and water down what we do and lose our heart and our values and things like that. Then you have a strong business that has no soul and no spirit. We don't want to ever become that. But the opposite is also true. You can become so heart-led and relationship-based that you're stopping the organization from expansion and growing, and ultimately the reach and the impact in community because you've just stayed stagnant. Having new people in there with different perspectives and experiences becomes critical. You mentioned finance people, always great to have on your board. Somebody with a legal background is really helpful. If you can't afford somebody on retainer or you don't have legal folks in your organization, having a board member with a legal background becomes helpful. I also find that having a communications person or a marketing person on the board, if you don't have that capability in-house, can become a critical role as well to have on your board. Really good points.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a really complicated and individual process thinking about what composition for your board will work. And not only just thinking about what will work best, but also sometimes who's even willing to be on your board, right? Being on a board and doing it well takes a lot of work. It's not a just check the box type of a thing. It takes a lot of commitment and time and paying attention and caring. And yeah, some people do show up and just kind of check the box. I attended the meeting. But if we're looking for the people that we've been describing throughout this whole conversation, it's a big effort. And I can share from the board that I was just recently on, we had terms of 2 years each. We could have those terms for up to 3 times. So you could have up to 3 terms. And then you were required to step off of the board for at least 2 years. And then you could apply again. There's a huge need for people to serve on that board. But you know, there's also that requirement of people rolling off and changing. And it honestly, I feel like 6 years is even too much at once because we ended up having folks there since almost the very beginning, if not the very beginning, for a really, really, really long time. And once we started having board turnover is when the organization really started to come back and really started to get grounded again and really started to get that potential that they saw, not just, oh, what could be, but no, they saw the potential and the group went for it and the group went to make themselves more sustainable and more effective in what it was doing. And with that, it's a lot of work, like I said. So people are going to roll off. If you have 2-year terms, you're potentially turning over your board every 2 years. That's a lot of work to make sure that you have the right people there for the right amount of time and making sure that you've got new people coming in as well. And when you're thinking about getting new people in and involved, like it was said before, it can start off as people who, like, you know, right? Oh, this person's interested or this person's cool. But when you're looking outside of it, there's different ways that you can get people involved. So there's the referrals, like the current board members or the staff say, hey, these could be great people to consider for these open positions. There's similarly nominations. And that one is very similar, but a little bit different at the same time. That one usually more so works where the people who use your services, or if it's a membership organization, the members or folks related or the community will nominate somebody to be considered by the board. So not necessarily the board members themselves, that's more the referrals, but when the community says, hey, this is somebody that should be considered, that's a nomination. And then applications are more like a job. And those can be targeted where you get a nomination from people and you get a referral and then you have somebody go through an application process. Or it could be open where you say, hey, anybody interested, apply. And you go through it like a job process where you're looking for the right candidate. I know that we ended up starting out with a fairly simple process of application where you do an application, you do an interview, you may have a follow-up interview, and then you're invited to the board or not. What we ended up with was 2 different versions of how we recruited to the board. So we had targeted outreach where we would refer people to an invite-only application. And these were usually people who had expressed interest in being on the board before. These were people who had done really great work out in the community. These were people in targeted areas that we were looking for, whether it was family peer support, whether it was a certain location, whether it was somebody with certain political knowledge. Like, these were targeted invites, but we still ended up having them do applications because we tried it before where we didn't have them do an application process, and that did not go great. And so we still had them do applications, and we would review, and not everybody invited to apply would get onto the board. Then the other way that we did it, and we did one of each year. So we did about every 6 months, we did recruitment because we were really working on building up the board after, honestly, organizational crisis, and others will talk about it that way as well. But we did it every 6 months for a while, where we did the targeted outreach, and then we did an open application where anybody who is a member of the organization could apply to be on the board. And it was essentially the same application as the targeted outreach. We were asking things like, what impact have you made in your community? What's the work that you are most proud of? What skills can you provide to the board? What are your thoughts on this aspect of our field? And so it wasn't easy questions, right? But they were directly questions that were focused on how would this person fit into our current dynamic and how would they benefit the organization.
In the chat, I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that Chris was saying, can you have a designated short and long-term seat? So you might have a 3-year seat and a 5-year seat. You absolutely can. You'd want to go back, and I know, Chris, you know this, you want to go back and look at your bylaws. They might need to be rewritten if you're going to have that type of staggering terms like that to reflect your designated terms. But that is definitely one way to be able to do that. And then Chris also said perhaps designating a board search committee could be a great way to find potential members. Absolutely. I can also tell you that there are business associations that have like volunteer volunteer searches because they have people that want to volunteer for a nonprofit. You have nonprofit associations that will post board and volunteer opportunities. We've also found associations of like lawyers in recovery, for example, that have groups of people that are both have lived experience and they have a specific professional background. So doing searches on your own, things like that, and putting it out there can be helpful too.
Thanks. And one more thing before I move on. Another thing to consider is, how are people even approved for the board? Is it the CEO that chooses the board members? Is it the board that chooses the board members? How is that set up for your organization? For us, it was all the board. No matter whether we had an executive director or not, the board was the one in charge of choosing who gets onto the board. For other organizations, it might not be solely the board's responsibility. Does the CEO or executive director have a seat on your board? Are they a part of that process? Or are they not? That's also something that, if you don't know the answer to that, you definitely need to take a moment to find out for your organization. And if you're a program within an organization, it's something that could be very helpful to know how things do get run in the board recruitment process.
Okay, so let's say you have the most fabulous board composition. You've been really intentional about it. You have people that are lining up at the door to want to be a part of your board. This was one of my lessons learned around onboarding and orientation of new board members. So I made a list, and you'll see in several slides. I hope I left you with some tools that are actually very concrete and usable for you to compare where you're at now, where you're headed, what you want your board to look like, and how you're orienting and onboarding your board. So issue number one that I find is most peer-run organizations, and actually to qualify as a peer-run organization, the percentage is typically 51% that have lived experience. The challenge is that just because somebody has lived experience does not mean they understand an RCO, a COSP, the history, the values, or how a peer-run organization is unique and how it operates. So many people that, my guess, you know and I've known, come through systems and services and then think that what has been done in their treatment programs, that's what you do. That's how you do it. And when you have a peer-run organization, we don't operate like a treatment program. Intentionally, we operate through a very different lens and skill sets and tools and things like that. So even if you have a board composition mainly of people with lived experience, that doesn't necessarily mean that they understand what a peer-run organization is and looks like and how it operates. So you want to make sure you're doing a great job of orienting, training, and onboarding. It is critical. So here are some of the best practices, and this is sort of big picture view. We're going to narrow down to more concrete. The first one is board members have to understand the why. If they're not connected to your why does the organization exist? Why did it start in the first place? Why does it currently exist? Why do you need to be in your community, in your state, or on the national scene? What would be missing if your organization was not there? If people are not connected to your why, it's easy for them to chase more structure and business and funding without understanding the heart and the soul of the organization and why it exists in the first place. So orientation, initial meetings, board retreats, all of these sort of things really do need to continue to center on your why and making sure that your board is connected to why you're in existence. Then we start getting into the what. So what do you actually do? So this is why we are here, but these are the types of things that we actually do as an organization. I told you before, we operate 18 programs. Can you imagine a new board member coming in and trying to understand the breadth and the depth of what we do as a peer-run organization? And I'm giving them a list of 18 programs, right? It's very difficult. So there is both the didactic of what we do, but there's also the inviting board members in to experience the organization, particularly if you do have something like a hub, if you offer trainings, if you do groups, if you have online work that you do. Exposing board members to what you do and how you do it can be a really important part of the orientation process of your board. And then you get into the how, right? So this is why we do it. This is what we literally offer. But the how we do it is the difference between other types of organizations and a peer-run organization. So this is how we're structured. This is how we take our values and operationalize them into our practices, into our day-to-day decision-making as an organization. This is how we prioritize, how we strategize. This is how we partner and do not partner. And this is how we communicate as an organization. So those are your three main ones: why, what, and how. Then you also want to talk about the history. What is the evolution of your organization, where you started from, and things that you have gone through that are really important for them to know, either as cautionary tales, like that was a good lesson learned, or as these were pivotal moments in our history, and this is where we're at right now, and this is kind of where we're going. You obviously, in your orientation, want to review all the information. So that is, and I have a document checklist, your bylaws, your mission, your vision, your values. I told you last time that we use board job descriptions. I had to learn that from somebody who is much wiser and experienced than me, that board members actually have job descriptions. That has been incredibly helpful for board members to understand their role and commit to it. Any policies that they need to know that affect the operations and the board, the budget, annual reports, strategic planning, any documents that they need to sign. Part of your orientation is reviewing all the information and asking questions and answering questions from new board members. As I said, inviting board members into experience the organization is really important. I can say it all day long, but if we are not exposed to it, it can be hard to understand how we operate. I just had the Secretary of our state come to our organization. Actually, I just had two people come to our organization. The Secretary of our state came recently, and Paulo 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐬 just came to our organization recently. And it doesn't matter how many presentations I do and how many meetings I sit in, inevitably what happens is when people come to the agency and they see it around them, there is an understanding that it connects the head and the heart in ways that words could never do a great justice of. And so having board members experience the organization can be really important. Introducing board members to each other, as well as any key personnel. All of our board meetings are also, we have our HR director and our chief operating officer. Sometimes we have our quality assurance data person in there, and sometimes we also have our marketing person in there. Again, that's going to change as your organization grows and you have those employees. But in the beginning, the people that are critical to know the board and for the board to know, you want to make sure that they are introduced. And then you want time to explore with your board members their unique contributions, what they hope to get out of the board, being on the board. I'm always interested in mutual relationships with employees, colleagues, board members, and partners. I want to know from a board member, what is it that you're aspiring to? What are the experiences that you want to have? Where is it that you're going? And how can we as an organization support your growth and development as much as you are supporting our growth and development? Then it becomes a relationship with our board members, not just a transactional, we need to vote on these things and we need to have a quorum, but it's actually people become committed to success of one another. So those are some of the big picture to-do things. When we start breaking it down, I'm going to show you a couple of things. So we have a board orientation binder, and I think there was a question in the chat. Can I share with you our board member job descriptions? Absolutely. In our board orientation is a binder that is divided out in several sections. Here are some examples of things that go into your board orientation binder. Having them pre-made up is really helpful. So when you have new board members, you can take your time and go through the sections with them. The history that we talked about could be a one-page. The history of the organization can be helpful. Your organizational chart. So if you're an organization like ours that has different layers of leadership and supervisors and programs and staff, and we have all these different departments of what we do now, having that visual org chart can be really helpful. Our first org chart was me and one other person. And it was literally like I was here and this person was an educator. That has changed over years. But having that org chart can be helpful for board members to orient to how the organization is structured. Any highlights for the year to date? So that could be an annual report that you provide. It could be some newsletters. It could be a document with your outcomes, but something that gets board members excited about the accomplishments that you have and where you're at. So Reggie, you talked about we're going into a new space, like we are securing a new space. If you have a new board member come in, to have them understand what a significant event that is in your history and get them excited about it is a part of what you want to be able to highlight. Board roles and responsibilities. I shared with you the last time when we talked about the charts that I showed you that has the employee responsibilities versus the board responsibilities, board member job descriptions, all of the forms, those all go in to the binder. A list of all the current board members, their contact information, their background and expertise, and how to get a hold of each other could be helpful. And then if you do have committees, what each committee is, the composition of each committee, why do they exist, where they're at, and any plans can be a part of your orientation binder. Oh, but wait, we're not done yet. That's page 1 of your orientation binder checklist. Here's page 2. List of upcoming meetings, have the calendar in advance so you're not doing the what day works for you all and let's just put out a doodle poll and who has the invite list. If you have all of that pre-planned, even if it's just for the 2 quarters of the year, and everybody knows when the board meetings are and the links and where it's located, is just really helpful. Any upcoming events that you have should be a part of your calendar, or any upcoming things that like this grant is due on this day, things that you want people to know and celebrate can be a part of that calendar as well. If you have a strategic plan that's updated, or even an old one that you're still using, you might want to have that in there. Your budget, your approved budget for the year that you are in. If you're in between board or in between fiscal years, you might want to have your current budget as well as your approved budget for the following fiscal year. Most recent audited financial statements. Not every organization is going to have a financial audit. Some of you, as we talked about last time, will have a compilation, is what it's called, until you get to a certain financial threshold. You don't need a complete independent audit. Some of you are going to have a 990. Some of you are not only going to have independent financial audits, you're going to have what is called a single source audit. It used to be called a yellow book audit. That's if your federal funding goes up above a certain number. You want your board members to be fiscally responsible, ask questions, and understand your financial picture within your organization. Because ultimately they have a responsibility as a fiduciary agent. You know how we went through our board member roles and responsibilities, and there are 3 main roles. Being a fiduciary agent is one of them. You want to make sure they have all the finance information. A copy of the bylaws. As we went through in depth last time, your bylaws govern your board structure and what they do and the committees. Fundraising plans, fundraising 1-pager, board meeting minutes, at least 3 meetings back. I would say at least, maybe even back for the last year. And then the agenda for your first board meeting. If you want to get more in depth and have examples and templates, I have a link there that you can go back to. There is nothing on this list that we do not have. That was like a double negative. We include all of these things in our board binder and board orientation. And we didn't always, as we are a newer organization, we've had to learn these things along the way. So let me just pause and see if there are any questions about what should be a part of your board information and be a part of your board orientation. Yeah, this is just the stuff, right? Documents, things like that. Okay, let's get into more qualitative. So that's the quantitative stuff. How do you orient new board members? I've done it differently at different times, depending on the board member, their time availability, and what was going on within the organization. I typically start out one-on-one with a new board member to go through things like our history, our bylaws, our strategic plan, job descriptions, forms. So I like to start out doing one-on-one meetings with all new board members so we can establish a relationship. They can feel comfortable to ask questions. I can go through all that minutia and it makes sense. When I get to the point where they're coming to the first board meeting, this is a really nice, simple, basic first meeting agenda as new board members come on board. So you want to have time for board members to get to know each other. If you are lucky enough to be able to do a board retreat or strategic planning process when new board members are coming on board, that's great. Oftentimes we catch board members in between, one term has ended, we have a vacancy, we have a new skill set that we need on our board, things like that. So it doesn't usually work out that clean, but we do want to create space to make sure that board members get to know each other. They understand why everybody is on the board, what they love about the organization, why they're committing their time and energy to the board and the wisdom that they are bringing to the board. So you want to have that time on the front end when people come in. If you have videos, newsletters, if board members have been involved in a recent fundraising activity, something like that, definitely use the first meeting of a new board member to share that and laugh together and celebrate together and do that type of thing. Usually I did it again. I did it the last time too. I said emergency department. The executive director, not the emergency department. Typically, the executive director will share the vision for the organization, the whys behind the whats, and then really talk about this board member and why this board member is coming onto the board. And, you know, that comes from my lunch with a new board member, my meeting with a new board member. The chair can review the roles and the responsibilities and field questions. I've already done that one-on-one, but if there are lingering questions, we can do that. Review the fundraiser and outline upcoming meetings. If you are interested in getting more involved in what a sample orientation checklist looks like or initial board meetings look like, I have linked these 2 examples for you as well. If you go into the board orientation checklist, you're going to see a really simple checklist. It's like 3 pages of everything that I just shared with you in a simple to use form. And as you're developing your board orientation, definitely use it as a resource if it is helpful to you. So that was a lot of information. So I want to check in and see if that made sense, if there are any questions or anything that I missed in your board development that were good lessons learned for you all. I covered it all, huh? Excellent. You can continue to add to your lists. Okay, so if there are no questions around the first, oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that this was helpful. That concludes our part 1 and 2 of board development that we did in our first session and then the first half of today. We are going to transition now to succession planning. And this is where my guess is there's going to be a lot of heart-led conversations and some challenging conversations, and that is okay. If we need to abort the content, we can abort the content. So here is the question that I want to leave you with as Jesse starts getting into succession planning. If you were to leave right now, who is prepared to be successful in your role or to advance the mission? So if your mission is policy, if your mission is practice change, it's more macro level, big picture system transformation, who do you have that has the knowledge, the skills, the connections to move that mission forward? If your role is more of a leadership, management, executive leader role, who do you have right now that is prepared to be successful in your role? So curious question. If you would raise your hand if you know exactly who a person would be that if you were to leave could keep this going, could come into your role pretty seamlessly with maybe just a little bit of context, but absolutely could take on your role. So show of hands, who has that person that they know right off the bat within their organization or maybe even outside the organization? Aha! That's what I thought. Yes. Succession planning is not easy. And it goes back to partly what Janet said is, how do you leave? How do you leave something you are so connected to, you might have grown or built? Or how do you find the people that can do what you do? Obviously, if we don't, we are putting the organization at a very serious disadvantage. You all know that there are a lot of advantages to succession planning, right? one of the things I will tell you that I feel very strongly we have not done well in the peer movement is passing on the leadership. So we've had some really strong pioneers in our history who worked so hard at even getting a reputation and getting our movement going and getting to a foothold into policy, who were not versed in planning, strategic planning, and investing in emerging leaders, who parts of the movement have died with them. Or there are people that are now scurrying to try to figure out how to regain what we lost when that person left. Our community in general does not do a great job of this. And so this is why we want to do this both from a heart perspective as well as from a intellectual perspective. This is the intellectual. We want to support emerging leaders. I don't want people to have to do what I did. When I became a CEO, I was never a CEO before. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have a success. I didn't have people around me teaching me how to do it. I had to mess it up really consistently, not realizing that I was messing it up. I still mess it up. I'm still learning. I don't want everybody to have to come into our organizations and the work we do having to punt because they are not prepared for the level of responsibility or the skills or the political savvy or the large world view that is needed to make these things work. And so succession planning really does help us find those folks and build them into leadership roles in advance from needing them to be in leadership roles. It requires you to do an examination of your organization, what roles are imperative and what skills are needed for those roles to be successful. It helps you identify the gaps. If you don't have another you, that's a gap. So right off the bat, without doing any other analysis, you all know that your organization may have a gap. By doing this type of examinations, it's going to reveal some of the areas that you are going to be vulnerable as an organization or that you need to develop. And obviously, when you replace somebody in your role, it affects the brand, it affects your mission and your reach. Having a good succession plan will help to maintain the organization during times of transition. So that's the intellectual part of it. From a shared experience part of it, I can tell you it's a process, not an event. I have been going through this process now. I have been saying that I've been ready to leave since 2012. What year are we in? We're 12 years later than that. I'm not kidding you. I was offered a national position in 2010 because I was like, I'm ready. I can't do this anymore. Well, here I am 2024 and I'm still the CEO. I had a very significant failed attempt at succession planning 2 years ago because I've never done it before. I didn't know how to examine this and develop a good, strong plan in place. And I propelled a person into becoming the next executive director because they had a lot of really amazing skills, but I didn't examine the skills that they did not have that ended up hurting us in some really serious ways as an organization. And so it really does have to be an intentional process. I can't emphasize this enough, and I said this on one of my tip sheets. Don't wait until you're old, exhausted, or sick. Right? That's a cautionary tale. Many of us wait to do succession planning until we feel like I can't do this anymore. I am just tired. I have been through a lot in my life. I'm out. And then not only do we feel in ways that we leave in ways that don't feel good, but it leaves the organization really, really vulnerable. And so you want to make sure that it's an intentional process. Well, what's it a process of? Identifying those key positions that are absolutely needed in your organization to keep the organization performing. You're not going to have to do succession planning with every position. You are going to have to do succession planning with really key roles. If my HR director were to leave, my COO were to leave, our quality assurance and data person were to leave, those are some pretty significant positions. If my QA person left, they're the ones that does our reports, our ARPA reports, our county reports, SAMHSA reports, all of our contract reporting, that's a significant risk, right? So I want to make sure I'm identifying those key roles. Then identifying what the skills, the experience, attitudes, and attributes are that are needed for that role to be successful. So it's not just saying, well, I need another data person. Oh, you've worked in data before, you're in. That's sometimes what happens within our organizations. And I see it in some of your faces, right? Like, shit, I need a person now. You've done it before, let's do this, right? That is a recipe for setting everybody up for failure. You want to take some time to look at that role and really examine all of these things. What skills, what type of attitude, what type of experience, qualities are needed for that particular role to be successful. And then you want to go through a process of evaluating existing employees for potential growth or for current opportunities. And I do have a tip sheet for you and a worksheet for you to be able to do that in an unbiased, non-personal, oh, they're a friend, I like them, or I can't stand their guts. How do we actually evaluate somebody's qualifications and qualities? I have some resources for you. We want to develop the employee skills through training, mentoring, and opportunity, through giving them more graduated responsibility and evaluating their success. I meet people all over the world. There are very few people that I meet that I would say are ready-made to just come into my organization and be a CEO. It's just not real. And I know amazing human beings. There is always some mentoring and always some training and some skills that go along with getting somebody prepared. I'm in the middle right now of about a 2-year succession plan. So I have a COO that I hired from within the organization. We are in year 1 of the succession plan, and that has meant a very intentional process of giving up responsibility, making sure they have the tools that they need, trying it out. I'm evaluating their skills for becoming a CEO. They're evaluating their own skills and what they need to grow into that position. I meet with them. I talk with them just about daily, at least 4 or 5 times a week. I meet with them for supervision twice a week. Here is why. It's a return on investment question for me. On the front end, when I am supporting somebody to become the next executive leader of an organization, for example, it is going to be front-loaded efforts. They're not going to know these things right off the bat. I will never get to the place where I can walk away and know this organization is okay unless I invest the time and the energy, mentoring and supporting and training on the front end. And so right now we are in the process of a very intense transition plan together where we are constantly evaluating, and they're using me as a mentor when things come up. When there are big decisions, they reach out to me and say, what should I be considering in making this decision? When there's smaller decisions, they reach out to me and say, just want to let you know, this is what happened. This is the decision I made. Is there anything I missed? So we're going through the process of that right now. You also want to identify the gaps that you have. I may not have had somebody from within to be the next COO or program officer or program lead. And so I want to be able to know that I don't have that right now. I might have amazing people, but I don't have the person for that position. And I might need to recruit from outside. And then, of course, you're developing your strategy. How are you going to build the person into the leadership role that they're interested in and that you're interested in? All of it is very planful and none of it is happenstance. So this gets to the heart of it. How do you let go? Here's what I want you to think about. What are the reasons why you're having a hard time letting go? What are your fears? What are your concerns will happen if you were to leave? And discerning the personal stuff. I love this place. I love what I do. Opportunities won't come my way. Like, that's the personal stuff. But being able to recognize and respect the personal reasons and detach that from the concerns you have for the organization. The personal stuff is stuff that you can work out in your own healing and well-being. right? The ego stuff and the fear stuff and the scarcity mindset and all of that. So will I be relevant? Like all that stuff is absolutely valid and keeps you in a role. Again, I know this. It can keep us stuck in, which prevents us from growing. So that's our own personal work that we need to do. On the professional side, I want to understand what my fear is if I let go. My greatest fear is that the organization goes away. Why? My name historically has been on every document. I have had to be the fiduciary person signing off. When we bought our buildings, it was my, I forgot what the name of it is. I'm sorry, my brain just left. But I was the one that was putting up collateral to purchase our buildings. I don't recommend that. That's a whole nother conversation. But it was me because I was the one that had been pioneering this for such a long time. I'm the one that has been at the helm building the reputation and running the organization. And my fear was, without me there, does the agency continue? Without me being able to address that fear and like digging that down even further, I will never be able to leave. Because there's always going to be that fear of what's going to happen after I leave. And so when you analyze it, it's preparing. Do you have the right people? Are they on the right bus? Are they in the right seat? And then preparing with the planning, the mentoring, and the evaluation of them to grow into the role or to find another person to meet the needs of what you're afraid of.
And I want to hop in real quick. I know for myself, I've been in many conversations where succession planning is this big scary thing, almost sometimes something that we don't even want to talk about because I don't even want to think about that person not being there. Or, oh, I don't want to put any doubt on this person or things like that. But it's not only what if this person wants to leave or retire, it's also what if this person ends up sick and in the hospital and can't do the work for a month or two? What if somebody needs to take bereavement leave? What if someone gets married? It's not always bad, but we have to make sure that we are ensuring the organization can continue and keep operating and being functional in the absence of any one person within that organization.
That's right.
I've had key people with the organization go on vacation. Great. Couple of weeks. Awesome. Exciting. It was planned. They came back. They had a major medical thing happen, which took them out for another couple months. We planned for a couple weeks. How are we supporting not only the organization, but also our folks who work for the organizations or who work for us to be able to take that time without worrying about logging into their work email because there's no one that can replace them? So there's so many different aspects of succession planning and looking forward that it's not just about, okay, it's time for me to go. It's how do we ensure the sustainability of this organization long term, whether or not I'm here.
You got it. If you divide those types of succession planning out, they end up being these three categories. The first one is really intentional development from within of emerging leaders so that you are more prepared, if possible, of who is ready to go in somebody's role if they were to leave. The second one is giving an advance notice. Like I'm giving advance notice, right? That there is a point in the future that I will be doing something else. And so we are doing that type of succession planning right now. And then there's, like, as Jesse said, the emergency or interim plan. And usually this includes an interim. When I was taking care of my spouse who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the middle of COVID, and it was the longest that I had to literally be away from work, an 8-month process of them getting sick, them in palliative care, them passing away, 3 additional months of grieving afterwards. If everything was dependent upon me, we would have been in big trouble as an organization during that time. Fortunately, I had built an executive team. We had built an executive team that was strong enough to make it continue. It wasn't pretty. I came back to a lot of messes, let me tell you. But it also didn't fail or end because I was gone. Definitely things I would do differently now. If you're looking at your existing staff, this is called a 9-box talent grid. And there's a form that goes along with this. It's a way to evaluate your existing team members against who has both the potential as well as the high performers. And you might see that somebody has the potential, but they're a low performer. Are they a low performer because they're not stimulated enough, because they don't know enough, they don't have the tools, but they have a lot of potential? You also have people that have low potential but high performance, meaning they hit their stride. This is probably the highest they're going to go in a leadership role or in a position because they've hit their capacity. And that's okay too. But you want to have a unbiased way of being able to evaluate who you have and who you should be investing the time and energy into to grow as a potential leader. So it's called the 9-box talent grid. And the next page is just examples of what each of those means. So you're looking at performance and potential. Performance is both skills, and I cannot emphasize this enough, attitude. I have had employees who are way skilled, but their attitudes have sucked. I have somebody right now who is a seasoned leader that I just came off of a conversation, a meeting with our COO before this, who they were saying, I think we're going to have to move ahead with not having this person in a leadership role in the organization anymore. Great talent, but they are negatively impacting their colleagues because of how they're showing up in some of their own stuff, right? So it's really a combination of skills and attitude. You have the low performance, they're not meeting their goals, up to high performance, they're exceeding or they're at least meeting. But you also need to look at potential. Who is the aptitude for professional development and growth? And again, it's sort of low, moderate, and high potential. So that's part of the evaluation process as you're looking at emerging leaders. And that's just another view of it. It might be your next step. Is you're thinking about who would take over my position? Start with what your position is and make sure you have a strong definition. Back into the skills, knowledge, attitude, and qualities that it takes for somebody to come into your role and do it well. And then do an evaluation. Nobody even needs to know that you're doing this. It just gives you practice. Think about the team members that you have around you and do this kind of impartial evaluation to see, do you have some folks that really do have strong potential? And with support and leadership development, they could potentially grow into your role. Maybe not today, maybe not even tomorrow, maybe in a few years. It is absolutely valid to do a 2 to 3 year plan of professional development with somebody. I'm going to end this with my lessons learned. On the right-hand side is literally the step-by-step process of how to do succession planning. So identifying your positions, identifying the skills, qualities, attitudes of those key positions, doing an evaluation of your existing employees, and then you develop your succession plan, including how we're going to mentor, how are we going to train, how are we going to build somebody into the position, and you evaluate the effectiveness. So on paper, this is what that looks like. On the left are my mistakes. Mistake number 1, do not wait until you're tired, old, or burnt out. Huge mistake for me. I got to the point where when I was ready to do succession planning and I hired the wrong person into that role, if I did not stay involved, the organization was the riskiest we had ever come to having to halt, meaning go away. Because I put the wrong person in a position. I was coming back after COVID and the death of a loved one that I was taking care of. I was exhausted. I was burnt out. I put the wrong position in there, and I didn't have the energy to prepare that person or do an evaluation of whether that person was right. And by the time I realized not only was it not right, it was detrimental. It was 8 months into it, and things were starting to implode in really significant ways. I had equal parts responsibility for that succession planning not working out, but it was almost to the detriment, meaning all of our employees would have been unemployed. So think about where you're at now and start your planning now. Don't base it on the next in line or length of time in the organization. You can't just hand over a leadership role or a significant role because somebody's been here the longest. Our COO, who is being built into a succession plan as the CEO, they may not ultimately become the CEO. Just because they're the COO doesn't mean that they're automatically going to become the CEO. There's a lot of decision making that needs to go into it, and I'm spending the time to mentor and develop a plan with this person to determine whether they should be the next CEO of the organization. I said writing out the skills, qualities, take the time to do that. Cross-training. Our COO is so smart at this point. They are saying, I want everybody to be cross-trained so that if I have to be gone for a month or a week, the agency doesn't end. So we are in the process of cross-training multiple people to be able to do multiple functions within the organization. A really good way of doing that. Do some pairing, mentoring, and buddying. Right? So find those potential leaders and pair them with somebody who has more experience and prepare them to think like a leader and operate like a leader and be exposed to some of the higher responsibilities and try it out. Develop individual professional development plans. Another thing that I cannot emphasize enough, when we do our HR, if I'm going to be presenting on HR, I will share with you professional development plans, performance evaluations, personal development plans, how to do a competency-based assessment with your team members so that it is impartial. Individual professional development plans are really important, which goes along with have excellent supervision and competency-based performance reviews. Make sure that you are doing progressive responsibility. Do not leave it up to chance. Develop a good plan. And honestly, my biggest mistake has been this last one. I see potential in everybody because I'm a heart-led person, and I propel them into a position that is out of their scope and it becomes too much too soon. This is where I have to be able to do an impartial, unbiased evaluation of potential and be able to not put somebody in a position that is over their scope too soon, because I have imploded some people professionally by doing that. Okay, Jesse, you said we have 2 minutes, right?
Yeah. So I want to also make sure to mention, as Shireen has done an amazing job, this is not the end of our conversations. We're going to be talking about boards. We're going to be talking about succession planning. We're going to be weaving through all of these topics as we continue going. But I want y'all to hold on to that 5-year plan or that 5-year vision if it's not yet a plan. Start talking with your colleagues about it, your coworkers, see what their thoughts are. Bring it into the discussion, bring it into our next steps. As we are coming up, we're going to be talking about funded development. We're going to be talking about fiscal planning. We're going to be talking about HR needs. We're going to be talking about fidelity in measuring the impact. And these are all things that are absolutely vital for implementing a 5-year vision or a 5-year plan, or even creating a plan. And my goal is that at the end of our next in-person event in May, you all will have the confidence to begin a strategic plan initiative, not necessarily an official one, because I know some of y'all are doing programs rather than organizations. I know that some of y'all are not in a position where you can do an official one, but I want you to feel like you have the confidence to start one, or to start the process, or to get that information that's needed to get it going. Because as we're looking at capacity development, which is what POGA is all about, right? Organizational capacity development, a strategic plan is one of the most vital things that y'all will need in order to make that happen, including succession planning.